This is a production of Cornell University.
So when I kind of got the invitation last year from Gideon, I was like super honored, but had to cancel at the last minute because of some unexpected healthy issues. We still kind of go through that process. But then when I kind of prepare for this seminar, I think it's not only just a seminar from kind of the research point of view, it's actually a pretty kind of interesting and fun way to kind of revisit my journey since joining Cornell. Because believe it or not, actually the first official Cornell seminar I got invited was from Plant-Pass, but dedicated in Geneva. And that's 2020. Kitty mentioned, we just started the lab, and that's the two students I have. One just graduated last fall, actually started his own startup on commercializing the robot he developed. And second PhD is still kind of in the pipeline, and hopefully can graduate soon, sometime this fall. And then, 22 is really kind of a booming stage for my lab, and you can see from three kind of people there looking at each other most of the time just through Zoom. Now we really have all of these folks and they enjoy the in-person activities and start to build the synergy as roboticists addressing many of these agriculture and food-related issues. And last year, we actually first time had this cross-lab meeting involving with Katie, Lance, and also Chang Chen, who is also a new hire actually in food science, dedicated for technology for post-harvesting evaluation. So with that, I still want to kind of revisit, that's actually the job talk I gave at Cornell back to 2019. And I still think this is the kind of the key vision. We now not only see that on the paper, actually we're gonna go through that through many of the true products now working on a daily basis and support different programs, especially in plant pathology. But the basic kind of a concept is we really want to kind of highlight using technology as a middle layer to better bridge between the human and the agricultural systems. Instead of using, tons of our wisdom and knowledge, and, we can have a technology layer to really more quantitatively gather this knowledge and hopefully can reserve them for many of the future generations in a different way than just writing books, right? And one of the good example nowadays is like we have all these AI systems, especially large language models, and how those can be used as a way to teach students way beyond Cornell. In my opinion, that's really kind of a passion as a technologist that I can foresee for the societal benefits. And then our kind of a story really started with the food chain solution, right? That's we call it a systems engineering. It's not a specific angle, but to look at the whole system and try to find, what other weaknesses there, right? Or the aspects to be improved. And instead of putting a lot of resources just solving a single problem, perhaps for each of these aspects, we make 1% better. Collectively, they're gonna give us not 5%, but maybe 50% improvements down the road. And that's really the vision there. And we kind of use the so-called multi-modality, multi-scale sensing technology. It's also not just a ground robot where we're gonna focus a lot today, but we have, in collaboration with Lance, we have the Blackbird as more like a laboratory microscopic imaging robot that we can gather the information really from the wet lab experiments and then translate it to the ground robots to get sub-millimeter, very high resolution imagery and information from the canopies of the plants in the field. And all the way to the drone or UAS-based imagery to get what the field looks like, right? Or what's this kind of a whole vineyard or orchard looks like, all the way to how the New York State and the global look like through the satellite remote sensing technology. And hopefully we can also gather all this knowledge, right, through from molecular all the way to the global as well. And in my opinion, that's where AI really, really helpful because as human, we have limited power to really figure out very complex relationships. And that's really these computational tools can help us in the long run. And then when I kind of look back, All right, so we talk about from all the way from breeding to pre-season, in-season, post-harvest, harvest, post-harvest, right? Why I just joined, all the bottom part are blank. Okay, so nothing there. It's just a blank page, and we start fill in. And in the past 4 years around, we kind of fill in most of these major components. As I mentioned, in collaboration with Lance, and in the early stage, also David Godary, also from plant pathology at Geneva. We have this microscopic imaging robot, and we actually just submitted a new initiative for USDA ARS, because the ARS kind of leadership is very interested in pushing this technology for all ARS labs across the country to do the high throughput phenotyping to better understand the plant responses to different stress stimulations. And in the middle, that's where we do for not only the breeding, like we have the field trials, the programs to evaluate their actual field responses, right, to different diseases. But we also have the drone systems that really can be leveraged for faster and kind of equivalently accurate sensing capacity to the ground system. And the last piece actually is this new lab scanner. Gideon and I really work on a lot from the breeding, right, all the way to how we manage the grapevines in the field during the season. And this is the last piece is, okay, we got disease infection for whatever reason, and the management does not really take effectiveness. And we ended up with all these infected grape berries, and how at the last step, people can evaluate their defectiveness and really sort out the highest quality that growers still can gain the monetary benefits rather than, okay, this is a kind of a totally died vine and we have no idea how to make money from that. And we just kind of published this paper last year and hopefully to just continue in collaboration with Terry Bates from Claro at Western New York. So that's the kind of a major thing we have achieved. But when I kind of think about what's the vision, right, for a roboticist to work with plant pathology in a broader context, this is a kind of a image I generated, and I'm a very passionate roboticist interested in plant pathology question. And my dream is to help my colleague really dealing with many of the daily scouting issues. Please help me generate a figure to demonstrate how this can be more collaborative, period. That's the text prompt. It's very long, but then just give me this very beautiful image, right? And that's exactly what I envision. We still need a lot of human pathologists in the room to use our kind of natural intelligence to advance the knowledge, really help people to understand this knowledge. But on the other hand, we start to have the robots to assist you as a human scientist, again, to better understand all these interactions and hopefully to also identify insights or any of the complex relationships otherwise human ourselves cannot easily identify, right? So when we can look at a two line of numbers, try to do regression, yes, we can even manually draw the scatter plot and try to identify some relationship there, doesn't matter that's linear, nonlinear. But when you have 1,000 dimensions of the data, the first challenge to me is like, okay, I stop working, right? The dimensionality is just booming, and how this AI and robotics technology can help us. And then that's another kind of a key thing that I did not really kind of see Bessie actually would be here, but I'm so appreciated you come. Because that's kind of relevant also, in my opinion, to a very traditional field in Cornell called agricultural engineering. I think many of you who are senior really know that department used to be actually the leader, not only in the country, but worldwide, to push for all the agricultural mechanization. But somehow we kind of shift the entries, and now we're catching up for the digital agriculture era. And one of the key things for our challenge for all the agricultural engineers, in my opinion, is we lack actually a solid science foundation to start with. Okay, the analog I kind of try to compare is when you consider biomedical engineering versus agriculture engineering, what's the key difference there? Only the study object is different. One is for human health, the other is for plant health, for plant pathology context, right? Other than that, it's just similar. And actually, plants give us more advantages because we can create more samples, more replicates, different genetic sources, and we can leverage all these to really advance our understanding about the life mechanisms. In addition to, just help us to manage the human disease, which is also very important. But it's just like we have a lot of other ethical issues that we don't want to kind of risk ourselves, right? So plants actually is very advantageous. But oftentimes the key thing is like, I don't know where I can start with from a science point. Do I have a solid science framework to guide my engineering advancement? And hopefully use those advanced engineering technologies to better understand the science as a closed loop. So Kitty and I kind of chatted a lot over the COVID, and this is really the figure I want to borrow from her, because this is a kind of a very cool starting point as an engineer to find the science foundation. When we talk about the disease, many of you, I believe, know more than me. We have the host, we have the pathogen, and then we have the environment. And somehow, because of her program entries, we add the management explicitly, but I still consider that as a part of the environment, right? From the engineering perspective, sorry, Katie. So we started with, okay, let's just pick these three. Pathogen, that's a kind of a different word in my opinion, and we're gonna just put that aside a little bit, and we're gonna find some aha time later on. So this is actually the starting point, okay? 2019, December, I heard Cornell has no tradition to close the campus because of snow, but my first day was a heavy snow and the campus was closed. I've been told your first day will be holiday. Thank you, Cornell. So that's actually the system. So my colleagues already used in the field to collect a lot of images and try to better understand what's the disease resistance response in the field. And then we start to come up with a more automated kind of a concept on the right-hand side, and you will be laughing, oh, what that small kind of a toy robot can do. But that's our starting point, right? We start to add a GPS, add different sensors, and start to automate the data acquisition process. But what is really key is two components there, right? When you talk about autonomous field scouting, we need to actually solve two problems. Number one, we need a navigation system, right? Just as the Tesla that now can drive just on the road, we need the robot to just traverse the whole vineyard or orchard or field autonomously without any human interference. And the second component is how the disease will be sensed from the images we collected. So that if we put these two together, okay, yeah, autonomous disease scouting, at least as a prototype. So this is a published work. And here we actually use a pure vision based guidance. On the left side, that's the input image seen by the camera from the front view. And then the right side is actually the AI-based determined pathway the robot should go forward to traverse the whole vineyard without any human interference. And surprisingly, we tested that out in different field conditions. It generated very well. So we collected the data actually in one of Kitty's vineyard in agri-tech, and we tested out that during the winter time in California, different vineyards in New York, and they just all work pretty nicely. Okay, so that gave us the confidence. All right, we have the navigation capacity here. And then we build the neural network, right, which is a kind of a buzzword nowadays, and to really identify where these disease infection regions are on the images. And we also further optimize the neural network so that we can get it faster and can be deployed on the robot directly. And putting these two together, that's, I believe, sure why. Many of you have seen this before. While the robot traversing through the vineyard, we get the input image, we get where the disease are, we get the canopies are, and then we also avoid any of the overlapping between consecutive images, right? Because we don't want double count anything there. And if we aggregate them all together, we can get the actual disease infection severity. And the good thing is, once we have this robot, right, it's no longer, as Katie mentioned, we need to have a group of 5 or 6, send them all to the field. Folks, let's do the scouting. Ooh. And after a week, we probably finish some kind of field scouting. And we know time is important for plant pathology because disease is not a static thing. They keep developing themselves. So there are a lot of variants there. So what we found is actually the scouting frequency is really a key, right? So we deploy this robot based on a weekly basis. And if we want, we can actually deploy that on a daily basis. And the interesting thing is we oftentimes talk about asymptomatic disease detection as the key information for the growers to know, okay, I need to apply preventive measures to suppress this disease pressure, right, at the good starting point. And oftentimes, asymptomatic disease detection is super challenging. And that's really because we have limited manpower to scout that frequently. And now with this robot can autonomously scout the vineyards on a weekly basis, what we found is at the beginning, that's the map, the robot get, if you can see my cursor here. And you see some of these purple-ish blocks. That's actually the panels start to show very, very early symptom. But if you look at the whole vineyard, it seems like that's fine. It won't really trigger any of the serious consideration. But when you kind of later on, all the way wait for 3 weeks, the human scouting really confirmed, no, you got serious disease issue. And this time window in between is what this robot can really fill in, right? Because we don't have the limitation because of the manpower. It's just you deploy this robot and you detect this map. And as early as just a week, we'll already identify these hotspots. And hopefully, if we come up with the right management strategy, we can contain them well and avoid getting into this situation. So with that, what we kind of want to convey is let's kind of explore further. What about the frequency of scouting can impact how the disease management practices can be? In the past, we have to wait for the scouting consultants coming in and tell us what happened. But now with this robot, if I do frequently, let's say push for even daily basis, what that can tell us, what's the new information we can leverage there. So the other thing I want to point out is actually the improved scouting sensitivity. So this is a kind of a commercial vineyard in Finger Lakes region, and we are targeting to detect the grape leaf roll virus, right? Which has a very obvious visual feature, is like a radish infection on a green leaf, right? So that's very kind of neat for this robot to do. And what we found is, in general, the robot and the human scouting align very well, like over 90% accuracy. But for some of the spots, the robot reported, hey, here, if you see this dot, we got some diseases there. But human report none. We're interested in, I know the model is not perfect, and we all know model won't be perfect, but some works. And then the good thing is, first, our impression is not to check all the lab nodes, is to go back, check our database, really pull out what's the GPS information for that particular region, and then what's the corresponding raw image look like. And that's exactly we show on the left side. That's a raw image. And then we have this model inference result on the right. And we identify, there is a very, very small portion being labeled as GRV infection as here. And I hope the contrast is enough, but we kind of zoom in this region and really bring to people, and we confirm, yes, that's a radish symptoms on green leaf. So we confirm there is a GRV, or kind of a GRV infection symptom there. So that really gives us the confidence, okay, not only about the accuracy, absolute accuracy, but also the way how we think and how we retrieve the information that we think might be a surprise to our research hypotheses. And that's where this robot can do now. So then we kind of distribute the PPB into different regions, and this is supported actually by the SCRI grant called ViceGen 3. It's the third generation. And we have collaborators all the way from California, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Wisconsin, Minnesota, West Virginia, and of course, New York. We have Kitty's program, we have Maddie's program on grape breeding, and also last program from the ARS perspective. And then what we kind of wondering is, okay, so we have these good tools for our researchers, and many of them can afford that for sure, right? And we don't need to worry. I mean, the only thing we need to worry is when we're gonna start to get these agencies back to function normally, and we can write grant proposals and start to acquire these tools for our research, routine research. But for growers, the challenge is always being around the cost and also their return on investment. And for each of the PPB prototype, roughly just the building itself costs $35,000, right? And if you consider for an entrepreneur to survive, you need to at least double that. So each vineyard need to pay for $70,000 to get one robot. I'm not sure when they can justify the ROI on their finance balance sheet, right? But of course, I don't want to be the one to create further disparity because of technology advancement. That's not how we've been passionate about technology advancement. So that's the reason we just do some kind of a brief comparison among the vineyards in different states, and we found, okay, remote sensing is the only viable option, right? Because we have the federal agencies like NASA to really offer affordable or even free satellite imageries that people can use. And also, we have some other private sectors that launch commercial satellites that will ultimately enable such of a thing happening using remote sensing technology. But the question is how, right? So when you consider the current remote sensing kind of work, largely is on one hand, we need to gather data from the air. And on the other hand, we need to have the so-called ground truth, right? So that they can really build a model to correlate the signals from your remote sensing dataset versus what we observed from the field. And later on, we can translate or dispatch this model for the actual uses. But oftentimes, getting the remote sensing data is no longer being the challenge, at least with all this engineering advancement. But who will be the human power get the ground truth measurements from the field, right? You all run your field experiments, and I, being very lucky, have my colleagues like Kitty to run that. I know they have, group of folks just dedicated for ground truthing. It's very tedious, laborious, and no one really, I wouldn't say not really enjoy it, but when you repeatedly doing that, then that's where boring starts, right? So our idea is why not we can leverage our ground robots as a source to ground truth what's happening on the ground and feed this ground truth data back to the satellite so that we can build a model between the robot-generated ground truth versus the satellite imagery so that we can have a model, but with a much affordable cost or price tag to build it. So here is what we kind of tried actually last season. Is first we deploy the robots in the vineyard, right? And as we demonstrated there, we can identify different disease and generate a geospatial map with what's their severity there. And instead of just having human ground truthing, we purely rely on this map as the ground truthing because we know the accuracy is pretty high and we can confidently trust it. And then we just collect the drone data or aircraft hyperspectral data actually later on. And then we build a model, try to see whether or not we can use the robot-generated ground truth to train a model to interpret the UAV or remote sensing imagery into disease severity. And here is what we got. The first case is actually, again, a research vineyard in agri-tech. And we use the UAV, which has much higher spatial resolution, but we use multispectral imaging, which we have less spectral information. And what we found is actually when the kind of a disease approaching to its peak time or end time, the accuracy or the correlation between the robot-generated ground truth versus the remote sensing or UAV signal is really high. And we can push for a model of accuracy about 80%. That would be really useful because you don't need to really rely on kind of a very time-consuming human scouting in the field. You can actually borrow this model and then just fly the drone with the hope we can deliver 80% accuracy, quote unquote, so that the growers can really use a faster speed to know what is happening in the field, right? But we all know what is kind of not really good for multispectral imaging is it lacks of certain spectral resolution that can really resolve the signal relevant to the disease infection or the disease itself. So that's the reason we leverage the hyperspectral technology. But before we kind of getting into build a model, what we do is first, as a data person, I really want to have a very solid statistic evidence to show, yes, the data, based on the data intrinsics, they are separable. So what we do is we use both human field scouting as a ground truth and also robot field scouting as a ground truth. And then we label all the pixels from the remote sensing data set and try to see what's the separation power between healthy and infected plants. And what we found is actually the robot is not only on par, but actually give a little bit more statistical power in generating the separation between healthy and infected plants through the hyperspectral data. Okay, to me, that's a really kind of exciting thing because then we have the solid foundation to build a model. And here is just a highlight of that particular region, and you can see for the human, the mean to mean is almost very close to each other. And if you consider the standard deviation, that just created a challenge for the modeling itself. But when you look at the bottom part, that's where the ground truth is from the robot. You start to see clear kind of a separation even between the two means, so that gives us additional power to believe the model should get improved. So with that, we just build a model, and of course, we kind of test it out on that hyperspectral imagery collected by the aircraft, and 5% improvement. So we're still kind of waiting for more data from the coming season and try to see if this is a solid 5% improvement or it could be just a variation by nature, right? And it is hard to tell at this point, but at least give us a very promising results from the data analytics perspective. And of course, with that, as we kind of discussed, what's the motivation there, right? It's really to have a scalable solution that everyone can afford to use advanced technologies. And that's the comparison, very easy, okay? A group of 4 to 5 people do the human scouting for this vineyard. That's actually a vineyard out in California. It takes a week. And with the robot, we need several hours to run the robots autonomously there. I mean, although you don't need to think, oh, I don't need to traverse there, how much power the robot can consume. Based on the current regulatory in California and actually most of the states in the US, you need to follow the self-driven car traffic policy for having autonomous robot running in your field. That's, I did not understand about that part, but that's what we've been regulated, okay? So I have brought that up to actually many of the New York legislators, and hopefully they start to discuss what would be the policy from New York to really embrace this technology and being like ahead of other states or even the world about these new regulatories for autonomous equipment in agriculture. And last is actually the NASA average data acquisition, just the whole region. And then it takes several minutes to run the model. Yes, you got it. Okay, so that's really the difference in terms of how soon we can get and how large the region we can cover in terms of using remote sensing, plus with all these robot technologies together. So up to this point, I would say, okay, we have the autonomous disease scouting. We have the disease detection models via supervised learning. So if you work on machine learning, this is the way like a human need to explicitly tell the answer what this is to the model so the model can learn what it is, okay? The pen is like we need human labels. And I know many of you don't want to do that. And then we have a proof of concept scalable scouting from the field to the region levels through this ground to aerial branch of this closed loop analysis. But what is missing there, right, is actually looking at this map, that's how we distribute our robots across the country. It's actually the model generalized capability, which is also a key for many of these AI research, is the model trained on one data set, whether or not I can rely on for many of unseen data sets in the future. And what we did is, okay, instead of just rely on the image itself, which gives us the visual feature, we leverage the multimodal models. So we use the language as a regulator, because that's how many of us as a human pathologists really kind of communicate, because I'm learning from you, and I'm not kind of learning from you to point all the pixels on the images saying, hey, that's the pottery mildew infection, that's the downy mildew infection, that's GRRV. I'm being told just when you look at the pottery mildew, that's a whitish layer on top of the leaf. And you need an acute angle to look at that so you can really see it clearly. That's how we really learn. And that's what we really want to push for AI technology, is why not to use text description as a way to tell the model what is the feature looks like in the image, so that combining both the image as a visual inputs and the text as another inputs, the model actually can get better performance. So here is just a quick thing to show with these improvements, we got a much higher accuracy as compared with the baseline model in the middle, and also another kind of a large foundational model called SAM. I think many of you also use that maybe. So get some improvements there. So that really demonstrates, yes, our hypothesis is correct. And when you try to use additional modality or the modality information, and the overall model performance will be boosted because the model is really trying to learn some of the knowledge rather than the superficial, pixel relationships. So then what we want to test is not just for the New York, right? We talk about the model generalized capability, and that's our target. What about we just pick one data set from California? And this is a totally unseen data set. We have no idea what's going on. And if you look at all these images, they even using different scoring system than what we use in New York. Their training system is different. And you see each group one is a very bulky canopy and being very well separated as compared as a panel, like a whole panel of leaves in New York, right? And how the model gonna perform? That's the first thing. We got just a zero shot, which means we train our model only using the New York dataset. Done. Modeling part is done. And we directly use that model, infer the disease infection on the California datasets. And that's what we found actually across 2 years from 23 and 24. So this is the error distribution. Remember, they have the scoring system from 0 to 6, right? Or 0 to 5, 6 different levels. And in the middle line, that's agreement with no scoring category difference at all. And then when you look at the overall distribution, maximum difference, categorical difference would be just a 1 level, either -1 or +1. And this is very consistent through 2 years of this testing. And we are very happy about that. So that demonstrates, okay, these models are generalizable. But what's the next? There's actually several aha times. Get ready. So the first thing we are kind of thinking is, at the beginning from the project, people are more interested in or concerning whether or not the robot can detect very low incidence cases, right? Because they are very challenging for computer vision. But what we found actually from the California dataset is, no, actually the model handled those low incidence cases pretty good, I would say. but more problematic with high incidence. And this is understandable because for many of the breeders or even plant pathologists, after a certain threshold, you're gonna just say, no, that's a useless thing. I'm gonna just give whatever score there, right? Regardless, that's really 55% or 75% or 95%. I all call them score 5, right? So that really being the key challenge, but it's actually a good thing because our model actually gives better percentage quantification rather than just a scoring. The second aha moment is, okay, now we have really disease progression, right? As I mentioned, it's not just a single time point. We can frequently deploy that on weekly basis, and we can generate this disease progression curve. And as a data scientist, I'm lazy, right? I lack of, to be honest, yeah, I lack of certain plant pathology knowledge. So what I do is really from the data perspective. Let's just run the clustering algorithm and see what we can learn from these disease progressive curves. And very surprising, we found a kind of cluster. If you see, starting with adding 4 clusters there is a bottom blue line showing consistently very low disease infection symptoms there, right? So from the breeding perspective, that's exactly the group we want to identify because they really give a very strong resistance to the disease in the natural environment. And that's what we really want to kind of find using big data, right? Because then breeding is a number game, in my opinion. The more numbers we put in, the kind of a higher likelihood we're going to get something useful. And this is really enable us to put more and more and more numbers there and to really enhance our possibility of getting the right materials for different environment or different desires. Aha moment 3 is actually, okay, so we compare, right? We have this progression curve, but how that kind of compare among different years? So what we usually kind of expect is actually the left side, right? If this is the genotype with certain disease-resistant genes kind of stacked there, we expect it demonstrate also high resistance to any of the pathogen. Like for example, this is for powdery mildew, right? But actually through the data analysis, we found the right side case. That particular genotype also have a stack of resistant genes, but why in 1 year is behave very normal, right? If you look at the blue and the red lines, that's actually the data from 23. But when you look at the black lines, that's the data from 24. It got kind of infected a lot by powdery mildew, right? And that really gives us a new science question. What happened? That's the part. Bring back this chart, right? So we discuss about all the plant environment management, but what we lack is what's the interaction from the pathogen point of view, right? There are so many isolate, and we know the mutant rates is very high for those microbiomes, right? And how that being considered so far in the whole breeding cycle or whole management cycle. And now our new tools really enable us to do that. And actually that right case, if you look at it here, is kind of overcome by a specific isolate of powdery mildew only identified in California, not in New York. Okay, but it might be a matter of time when it can be here. So with that, we have some new chapters to ongoing, right? We have affordable, scalable solution, especially now we want to bridge the closed loop from the arrow to the ground, right? Robots are very neat, but they are so expensive. And how to strategically deploy them into different places that can help the remote sensing model even being better than nowadays. So that's our next question. And also it's an economic question. Now this agtech sector being solely focused in California, which I understand why, but is this the right way to allocate all the resources there? And how to strategically really expand and reallocate these resources, both help the growers to combat their production kind of challenges, but also help these startup companies really gain economic benefits. And hopefully that can also boost regional economy because of the technology innovation. And then, of course, with this new approach, we start to add a pathogen back in the whole thing, right? Then we really have 4 components there, try to identify their complex relationships, and we hope to reveal more. And the last part is a participatory research approach. We talk about this high tech, but my heart goes with people and where we are right now. And that's actually ongoing effort from my student supported by NASA. We call it the Farm Ecology Network. And basically is if everyone, doesn't matter if you are a grower or not, can contribute a cell phone image with a specific guidance, that would allow us to build AI models to better understand the regional level thing without much of a pressure lacking of data. So I hope to share more maybe in the coming years or two. But so far, everyone we reach out is very excited about this approach because they now feel being part of agriculture rather than, oh yeah, I'm just a buyer of the agricultural produces, period, right? So if you are part of something, then you start to generate a different motivation and passion. So with that, I'm gonna acknowledge for all these funding agencies, programs to really support all this wonderful work, and also thank everyone in actually the beginning, picture from the 4 labs who, made significant contributions. Otherwise, I won't give the talk here today. With that, I hope I still have some time to take questions. Thanks. Yeah.
I was just curious, you said that the robot was around $35,000 now, I think. Did you compare with how much it costs for the ground truth by humans? What does it cost for that? Can you repeat the question? Yes.
So the question is, the robot costs $35,000. And what's the cost for human scouting for the equivalent coverage, right, and accuracy? That's a great question. And we did not really do a very precise calculation on that kind of a category because largely we tested mostly for the research vineyards.
Right.
And that's being paid by Katie's program. I'm not sure how much dollars you put for that. But I guess that's a kind of a significant portion of your program, right? Being hired people and doing that. So I would consider robot still might be cheaper, right? Might be cheaper in my opinion. But again, technology itself, the robot itself is there, right? But so far, we need the operator to learn what is Linux. How many of you use Linux on a daily basis? Right? Yeah, okay. I saw several people. And there are some kind of a troubleshooting skills we need for the operator, right? What if something happened and how you can really quickly put the robot back in function. So those are steep learning, maybe not steep, but at least some learning curves there to prepare a new workforce. And that's the reason why through my extension, actually, we put a lot of efforts now, try to distribute needed training materials for the growers, but at the same time working with different sectors, try to lever or create the synergy to build the new workforce development programs, especially with Cornell as a so unique position with all of these aspects.
Did the math real quick. So for just the training data for the whole season, it was approximately $12,000 for like sub 1 acre. So as soon as you're using the robot in its current condition over 3 acres, you're netting positive. So, and that doesn't count like indirect cost.
Oh, yes.
I think it was better.
Well, I have a follow-up question to Bill's about the cost of the robot. It also relates to resolution of the satellite. And relates also to like the potential of the imaging technology for precision agriculture. So unless I'm mistaken, a lot of growers are in their fields on a regular basis, driving their equipment. How much of the cost of the robot is navigation, right? And relative to image acquisition and data analysis. So you take the guts of the robot and put it on the tractor, right? And make something, and is the image analysis fast enough, or is this a realistic goal? So that you put it on the front of the tractor, and the images are analyzed by the time the back of the tractor passes, and then this nozzle comes on or off. Okay.
So let me summarize your question. It's like, how about to translate some components from the current robot prototype into the existing agricultural machineries so that we can lower down the operation cost while still taking advantage of all this advanced technology, right? Okay, great. And that's a great suggestion. And I agree with you 100% about that. And I'm not sure if you notice when we distribute the robots to different places, we do not distribute the whole prototype. We actually take out the imaging kind of a component or module and really distribute that part, because when we consider autonomous scouting, right? Autonomous is one thing that's more like about navigation, and people may not really enjoy or like need that like a $15,000-ish navigation module, but they much more like the $20,000 imaging module with analysis capacity, right? And I agree with you. Then we can attach to ATV, tractor, any of the ag equipment nowadays we can easily find in the vineyards or orchard or other kind of farms so that people can start to gain the benefits. One thing I want to kind of highlight is actually the analysis power, right? Or the speed or turnaround time of getting the raw data to the result the growers can use or researchers can use is getting much faster. And my personal kind of vision is this thing's gonna improve infinitely, right? And even for our current robots, is running on a near real-time term, which means as soon as the camera taking one image, the analysis module finish the inference at the same time. And then you will just keep continue. So at the end of the scanning of the robot, we also start to have the map of where the diseases are in that kind of a particular field, and it's all geo-referenced. So then back to your last point, that really kind of enable us for many of these precision management practices, right? And then we can use for target spray or even using the current fan base that still can save a lot of chemicals, which is also a concern right now. But in the long run, I would see having this robot might also help us to manage the soil problems in the long run, because the large ag equipment cause a lot of soil compaction and there is no kind of a good solution, right? That might be an additional motivation. And also because of the cost, if that's kind of a compact system, growers may just share that unit and just load on their trailer and walk around so several people can just buy one rather than every of them will buy one. Yeah, I hope I answered your question in a more comprehensive way. Yeah. Yes.
So are you able to differentiate different diseases?
Great question. That's a wonderful question. So at the beginning, we solely focus on either downy or powdery or GRRV. And last year, for that kind of a sensitivity slice, if you still remember, robot is better kind of identified a small spot. That's actually a mixture of downy and GRRV. So we will be able to differentiate that. But largely, my kind of a personal opinion is I really use human pathology as the standard. What human can do. Let's don't really kind of consider more advanced sensing technologies because that always give us advantages, right? But let's step back. You and I just have this naked eye, just for the visible range to see all these things in our world. But with your knowledge, you still be able to differentiate a lot of these things. And my current goal is how we can push robots and AI to achieve that first. And of course, if we can achieve that with advanced sensing modules, with additional information chain, everything gonna be just boosted naturally.
I could add as well. So a lot of people from my group have spent a lot of time training the robot. In particular, my field research manager, Dave Collins, who's forgotten more about disease management than I think any of us would really hope to know. The robot, the new model, is just as good at looking at its imagery as he is now. So there's still room, like, him in the field, him like sticking his head in the vine, like being there, but like looking at the imagery, they're equivalent. And I think that gets to Yu's point where it's like the human capacity standard.
You want to repeat that to the Zoom audience?
Oh yeah, for whom on Zoom, what Kitty kind of add in is now the robot is as good as her very long-term and wonderful technician, Dave Kahn, with like 30 years of experience about the disease in grapevines. Thanks so much for the comment. Oh, yes, sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, yes and yes.
Is the autonomous ground imaging dependent on fair weather days? Or is it restricted by very bright days, like post-rain, or is it overhead irrigation? Do you face limits like that?
Yeah, the question is whether or not the robot being limited by environment conditions like the sunlight or varying, conditions. So, great question. So far, the only kind of enemy for the robot is the severe weather events, like very windy, very snowy, very rainy. I cannot run that because nothing is, weatherproof. But other than that, so I did not introduce more on the sensing side, but we use active illumination to combat the sunlight. So the camera does not rely on the natural light to provide the information. It actually rely on an artificial light, so that only that light provides the illumination, and that's how we really try to control the data quality consistency, and actually also boost the AI model for the generalized capability. So it serves for both purpose, and it can run day and night. Yes. Yeah.
My question was about what powers the robot, and like if it's a charge, like how long can it go without needing a charge? Like I'm thinking if it's in the middle of a vineyard, it might be hard to go back and charge it. So yeah.
Yeah, so the question is about the battery consumption or the power consumption and charging time for the robot. So far for the robot, it can constantly run about 3 hours for one charge. And usually we feel that's kind of sufficient to cover Kitty's 2 acres field per charge. But of course, we are upgrading all the platform and with the improved battery technology. And I know at Cornell, we have a lot of researchers on, energy side. We hope actually to further improve that down the road. Yes.
Is there any questions on Zoom?
Oh, I missed that. Let me open that. Oh, there are several messages on the Zoom. Sorry, folks. Just open that. First comment from Gary, very exciting, promising research, well communicated. Thanks. Thanks to Gary for you. Second, from Edwin, I'm wondering what is the maximum height that robot can extend? Can it work on hops up to six meter tall? So Ed, that's a great question. So far, so it's not on this kind of a robot-based platform. We have a new one, and that one can be used for apples, although for a different purpose, not for disease at the moment. It's more like for its 3D structure, for the digital twin purpose. So I would say 6 meters might be okay. It depends on the base, right? Everything is down to the mechanical designing, whether or not it's stable, and also a challenge for New York forever is our kind of terrain situation. If that's in Oregon, Washington, California with a super flat field, I would say, oh yeah, let's just do that. But now with New York, we have all these slopes, ditch, all these things. I think it's kind of a very case by case at this moment. But I think in general, 6 meter would be okay. Yeah, hope to answer your question. Next from Luke. Do you think it will be on the individual farmer to buy into this remote sensing technology to use it? Or do you foresee that there will be a subscription service, perhaps where a company will have a fleet of drones, rovers, sensors, extra, and be able to work with farmers to do the data capture to data processing and make recommendations on decision making? Wonderful question, Luke. So that's also my feeling. I don't really have a very strong opinion either way, but I think both can work. And I see definitely both work because for many of the pilot growers who kind of run very large vineyard, generate tons of the revenues, their only question is how I can maintain that, right? By saving money. That's their kind of a first priority. And I wouldn't see they would be hesitated if this is the proved technology, they're gonna invest on that and then really use that on a daily basis. But of course, then down to small to medium-sized farmers, that's a totally different world. And sometimes even asking for, $500 subscription fee, can be a glitchy question there, right? So I definitely foresee both business model could run. And I think the best way is let's just explore and see how these things go naturally. Because in my opinion, what we bring in for this closed loop framework is to let the pilot and the large growers to actually help the small to medium sized farmers, because largely the training data set going to be contributed by them, and then the knowledge can be translated to the other group who might not be able to afford this advanced technology at the moment. Okay, last from Donna, hi you, for virus detection, the best use for remote sensing might be in the nursery. Do you have any plans to use the robot or imaging models in a commercial grapevine nursery? Wonderful question, Donna. Maybe you can just shoot me an email. Let's just chat after this seminar. It sounds like a very interesting use case scenario. Yeah, that's what I got from Zoom. Yeah. All right, thanks everyone.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.